Most people spend their entire lives chasing wealth, believing that if they work harder, think more positively, or simply wait long enough, prosperity will finally arrive. But what if that belief has been backwards from the very beginning? What if the harder you've tried to force prosperity into your life, the farther you've unknowingly walked away from it? Florence Scovel Shinn believed one silent belief keeps millions of people trapped in struggle without ever realizing it. And once you see it, you'll never think about money the same way again. Because the real question was never where your abundance is. The real question is this: if what belongs to you is already finding its way, what has been standing in the way of the meeting? Most people never lose prosperity because they aren't worthy of it. They lose it because they've been looking in the wrong direction. That may sound like a simple idea. It isn't. Because if it's true, then almost everything we've been taught about finding prosperity has been backwards. Somewhere along the way, most of us picked up a quiet belief. We never said it out loud. We may not even remember when it started. But it has been running underneath every financial decision, every anxious night, every moment of comparing our life to someone else's. The belief is this: if wealth still feels just out of reach, maybe it was never meant for me. You know the moment. Late at night, laptop still open, the login screen for your bank account glowing a little too bright in a dark room. You check the balance you already know. You close it anyway. And somewhere in that small, ordinary motion, a thought slips in that you would never say out loud to anyone. Maybe this is just my life. And the frightening part is, you almost believe it. Not a dramatic thought. That's what makes it dangerous. It doesn't arrive as despair. It arrives as acceptance, as realism, as the quiet, reasonable-sounding voice that tells you some people are simply built for ease, and you were built for effort, and no amount of effort has proven otherwise yet. It's a strange kind of fear because it doesn't sound like fear. It sounds like maturity. It sounds like, maybe I'm just not the type of person this happens to. You watch someone else's success, a friend's new home, a stranger's story online, a life that seems to move without resistance, and quietly, without meaning to, you file it under proof. Proof that abundance keeps choosing other people. And somehow, never you. Here is the image that keeps showing up in one form or another, in almost everyone who feels this way. A train. You're standing on a platform. You've been standing there a long time. You became convinced you watched it come through once. Maybe years ago, maybe you're not even sure when. And somehow you weren't on it. Not because you didn't want to be. Because you didn't know when to run, or which platform, or whether it was even your train to catch in the first place. So you wait. You check a schedule no one gave you. You tell yourself the next one is coming. And some nights, quietly, you wonder if you missed the only one that was ever meant for you. Florence Scovel Shinn spent her life studying something most people never think to question. Not whether prosperity exists, but why so many people spend their whole lives standing on that platform, watching, waiting, convinced the train already left without them. She believed there is a divine order quietly arranging far more than any of us realize. Just because you cannot see movement doesn't mean nothing is moving. Don't worry about understanding that yet. Just hold on to it. Because there is a road that keeps appearing in her writing. Early before dawn, mist still low over the ground. A woman walking it alone. She looks down. One set of footprints. Nothing unusual about that. Just hers. Just one. So if a divine order really is arranging things we cannot yet see, why does fear always seem louder than it? And what if fear has been the only reason the road has felt so empty? Fear almost never arrives wearing the name fear. It usually introduces itself as responsibility, caution, as being realistic. It sounds like the voice that's simply looking out for you. The one that says slow down, be careful, don't get your hopes up. And that's exactly why it becomes so difficult to recognize. You don't feel afraid. You feel sensible. You've felt it before a small decision, not just a big one. The item you leave sitting in the cart overnight, telling yourself you'll think about it. The quote you never send because what if they say it's too much? The raise you never ask for because the timing never quite feels right. None of it feels like fear in the moment. It just feels like waiting for a better time that somehow never arrives. But wait, if it never announces itself as fear, what is it actually protecting you from? Here's what's strange. Every one of those small hesitations is guarding against the same imagined outcome. Running out. Being left with nothing. That's not really about the cart or the quote or the conversation with your boss. That's a much older alarm, going off in a much newer situation. Fear isn't the root. It's only the echo. Scarcity is the voice. Florence Scovel Shinn often challenged the habit of accepting appearances as final reality. In her view, when we accept limitation as ultimate truth, we naturally begin acting as though good itself were limited. As if there were only so much of it to go around, and someone else might reach it first. And once that belief takes hold, it doesn't stay in your bank account. Soon it begins shaping your relationships, your opportunities, your confidence. And eventually the way you see the future itself. If someone succeeds, you quietly feel there is less left for you. If someone receives an opportunity, you wonder whether yours has disappeared. If someone seems blessed, your mind starts counting what is missing instead of what is still possible. None of that feels like a belief. Feels like who you are. That's what makes it so hard to question. A belief that old rarely announces itself as a belief. It disguises itself as personality, as just being practical, as the version of you that's simply too smart to get fooled by hope. But it is a belief, which means like any belief it was learned, and what was learned can be looked at, which is very different from being stuck with it forever. Nothing in Florence's writing suggests she saw the world as a fixed, limited table with only so many seats. She wrote about something else entirely, something we'll get to shortly. But before we get there, one question is worth sitting with. What do you actually believe about how much good exists in the world? Whether you've ever spoken that belief aloud or not, your decisions already have. Let's stay with that question for a moment, because once you answer it honestly, you'll begin noticing something that has probably been hiding in plain sight for years. It isn't that you believe abundance is limited. Nobody would say that out loud. We don't wake up believing there isn't enough. We wake up assuming someone else will get there before we do. And that single assumption doesn't just sit quietly in the background. It reaches forward and rearranges everything you see. Have you ever noticed how two people can live through almost the same week and come away believing they live in completely different worlds? One person sends an email and hears nothing back. Nothing is moving. Another sends the very same email, hears the very same silence, and quietly thinks, something is still unfolding. I'll follow up tomorrow. The circumstance is identical. The interpretation isn't. Scarcity doesn't begin by changing your circumstances. It begins by changing the meaning you assign to them. An empty bank account is an appearance. A quiet season with no opportunities in sight is an appearance. Someone else's success arriving before yours is an appearance. None of these, Florence taught, tell you the truth about what's actually available to you. They only tell you what's visible right now, from exactly where you happen to be standing. And appearances, by their nature, are incomplete. They hand you a single frame and ask you to believe it's the whole film. Imagine walking a road with your eyes fixed only on the next two steps. Every bend looks like a dead end. Every stretch of silence feels like proof you're lost. Not because the road changed, because your field of vision did. That's what scarcity actually does. It doesn't remove the good that's coming. It narrows what you're capable of noticing until only the lack is visible. And once that's all you can see, it starts to feel like all there is. And sometimes, the opportunity arrives on the very day you'd already decided nothing was changing. The phone rings. An email finally appears. Someone remembers your name. A door opens that seemed completely still only hours before. The opportunity wasn't created in that moment. Simply became visible. Here's the part worth sitting with. It wasn't really a financial decision. It was a decision made from a rationed universe. Made by someone standing on a road, eyes fixed 2 steps ahead, certain the bend up ahead was the end of the path, never once considering it might simply be a turn. No wonder it felt like effort. No wonder it felt like fighting for scraps at a table where the seats seemed to keep disappearing. Florence didn't ask her readers to pretend the bank balance was different than it was. She asked something harder, to stop reading that balance as a verdict on what's coming, and start recognizing it as one frame, a single incomplete frame, in a much longer film they haven't finished watching yet. 'Cause here is what almost always happens next. Once narrowed vision quietly takes the wheel, you stop trusting the road to provide. So you start carrying everything yourself, trying to become the road. Trying to become the road is exhausting in a very particular way. It doesn't look like exhaustion from the outside. From the outside it looks like drive, like discipline, like someone who simply refuses to leave anything to chance. You plan 3 steps ahead of every conversation. You've already rehearsed the worst-case version of tomorrow before today has even finished. You don't call it fear anymore. You call it being on top of things. But underneath it, something quieter is running the whole operation. If I don't hold this together, nothing will. That's what control actually is. It's the specific exhaustion of someone who no longer believes anything good will arrive unless they personally drag it into place. You wake up already solving problems that haven't happened yet. You answer emails while thinking about next month's bills. You finally sit down to dinner, but your mind is already rehearsing tomorrow. The day ends. Your body is home. Your mind never arrived. None of that feels like distrust. Feels like responsibility. But ask what it's actually protecting against, and you'll find the same fear from 2 blocks ago, wearing a new outfit. Underneath the planning, underneath the rehearsing, underneath the refusal to rest. If I stop pushing, everything stops. Florence Scovel Shinn wrote about this with unusual directness for someone of her era. She described the strain of trying to force life into our preferred timing, what she sometimes called struggling in one's own strength, and contrasted it with something she considered far more powerful, cooperating with a divine order and a divine timing already in motion, rather than trying to manufacture every result alone. That distinction matters more than it sounds like it should. Imagine walking a long road while carrying every suitcase you own. First, it feels responsible. After all, they're yours. But mile after mile, you become so occupied with the weight in your hands that you stop noticing the road beneath your feet. You stop noticing the signs. You stop noticing the direction. And eventually, you stop noticing that you were never walking alone. That's what a life run entirely on control feels like from the inside. Not peaceful, not open, just quiet enough on the surface to look composed, and loud enough underneath to drown out anything trying to reach you. Because the mind that's constantly clinging has no room left to notice what's already arriving. If any part of this has felt familiar, here's a small way to mark it. Not a confession, a decision. If this resonates with you, write these simple words in the comments. I trust the next step. Not the whole road. Not the whole outcome. Just the next step, which Florence taught is usually all we're ever actually asked to take. Control feels like the opposite of scarcity. Feels like doing something about the problem instead of just believing in it. But look closer and it's the same belief working harder. Scarcity says there isn't enough. Control says, then I'll have to get it myself by force before it disappears. Which means the exhaustion was never really about how much you were carrying. It was about believing you were the only one carrying anything at all. What if your greatest fear was never that wealth wouldn't come, but that it had already passed you by, that you missed the moment, missed the opportunity, missed your life? Florence Scovel Shinn believed that fear rests on one assumption almost no one ever questions. And if she was right, everything we've talked about until now changes. Fear may delay your experience of it. Scarcity may cloud your vision of it. Control may exhaust you while reaching for it. But none of them have the authority to erase what is yours by divine right. Sit with the weight of that for a moment, Because it quietly answers a fear you may have carried for years without ever saying it out loud. That somehow you missed your chance. That the window closed. That whatever was supposed to be yours went to someone else while you were still deciding whether you deserved to ask for it. Florence's answer was not comfort for comfort's sake. It was a different reading of reality altogether. She taught that infinite intelligence is not sitting somewhere far away, waiting to be convinced. It is already arranging the way, already moving. This is the idea we've been circling since the very beginning, without naming it directly. What belongs to you is already finding its way to you. Not because you finally worked hard enough to earn it. Not because you performed the right ritual, said the right words, or proved yourself worthy through struggle. Because, according to Florence, it was never separate from you to begin with. Your divine right to good is not a prize you win. It is a fact about who you already are, waiting for you to stop standing in its way. Which means the real question, the one this entire video has been building toward, was never, where is my wealth? It was, what have I been doing that keeps me from meeting it? Remember the road. The one that kept appearing quietly, since the first few minutes of this video. A woman walking it, believing she walks alone, looking down at a single set of footprints and mistaking that for proof. What if the road was never empty? What if every step you've taken, divine order has already been taking one toward you? You didn't create that movement. You couldn't have. It was already in motion before you were afraid, before you believed in scarcity, before you started gripping the wheel with both hands. What you could do, what you can still do, is stop walking away from it. Every one of those 3 blocks, according to Florence, was never really about money. They were about resistance to a meeting that was already underway. Just because you cannot see movement doesn't mean nothing is moving. You have been walking, has been walking too. Perhaps the meeting has been closer than you ever imagined. Not because the road suddenly changed. Because you're finally looking up. So if the meeting was never the problem, what actually needs to change? Not the road. Not divine order. Not whatever it is you've been waiting for. What needs to change is simpler and harder than most people expect. The way you've been walking. Florence Scovel Shinn didn't teach that recognizing this truth was enough on its own. Believing a road exists doesn't move your feet. She taught something more practical. That alignment with divine order is not a feeling you wait to arrive. It's a series of small, deliberate choices, repeated until they become the way you naturally walk. The first choice is noticing when you've left the road at all. Most people don't leave it dramatically. They drift. A worried thought here. Controlling decision there. A quiet moment of scarcity while scrolling past someone else's good news. None of it feels like a decision to leave the road. Feels like just reacting to life. But each one is a small step off the path, taken so gradually you stop noticing you've wandered. The second choice is returning without punishing yourself for having left. This matters more than it sounds like it should. Many people, the moment they notice fear or scarcity creeping back in, respond by criticizing themselves for not being positive enough. Which is, ironically, just another form of the same fear wearing a different disguise. Florence taught something gentler and, honestly, more effective. The moment you notice you've stepped off the road, you have already begun stepping back onto it. Noticing is the return. It doesn't require punishment first. The third choice is smaller than most people expect. And that's exactly the point. You don't need a 5-year plan to realign with divine order. You need the next step. That's all Florence ever really asked of her readers. Not certainty about the whole journey. Just enough trust to take the step in front of you. This is where most spiritual teaching stops. At the idea. Florence rarely stopped there. She built her work around practice. Specific words, specific moments of quiet, specific ways of directing attention until the mind and the walking match each other again. So here is where we're going to do exactly that. Not talk about the road anymore. Walk it for a moment together. This will only take a few minutes, but it may be the most important few minutes of the entire video. So if you can, put away anything else competing for your attention right now. Just for this part, we're going to do something simple. Not complicated, not mystical, just honest. Florence Scovel Shinn believed that most people never experience a shift in their circumstances because they never actually locate the exact belief standing in the way. They work on money in general, which is too vague to move anything. Instead, she taught something far more specific. Find the one thought, the one fear, that has been quietly running underneath everything, and speak directly to it. So let's find yours. Think back over the last 3 blocks. Fear, scarcity, control. One of them probably felt more familiar than the others. Not because the other 2 don't apply to you, they might at different times. But one of them right now feels like it's been living closest to you lately. Take a moment. Which one was it? If it was fear, the sense that you're somehow already behind, already too late, already watching the train pull away, notice that. If it was scarcity, the quiet belief that there isn't quite enough, that someone else's good fortune means less is available for you, notice that. If it was control, the exhaustion of believing nothing will happen unless you personally force it into place, notice that. Whichever one it was, don't judge it. Don't rush to fix it. Just name it silently to yourself. That alone is more than most people ever do. Now here's what Florence would ask you to do next. Not argue with the belief. Not prove it wrong with logic. Instead, speak a new sentence. Quietly, out loud if you're able to, or simply in your mind if you're not. And let it stand next to the old belief without needing to defeat it in an argument. Here is the sentence. What is mine by divine right is already finding its way to me. I release my need to be ruled by fear, scarcity, and control. I trust the next step. Say it once, slowly, then say it again, a little slower than the first time. Notice if any part of you resists it. That's normal. That resistance is not a sign you're doing it wrong. It's simply the old belief, the one you've been carrying a long time, noticing that something is changing. Now stay here for a moment. Don't reach for anything else yet. Don't move on to the next thought, the next task, the next worry waiting in line. Stay. Take a slow breath in. And let it out slowly. More. Now. This is the part almost every video skips. And it's the part that matters most. Florence taught that after making a declaration like this, the work isn't finished. It's just beginning, quietly, somewhere you can't observe directly. Florence often spoke about the mind continuing to work while the body rests, carrying forward the ideas, beliefs, and impressions we repeatedly accept. You may feel, in this moment, an urge to immediately look for proof. Check your phone. To ask, well, did that work? That urge is worth naming too. It's control again, showing up in a smaller, quieter form, unwilling to let go even for a few seconds. If you notice it, that's fine. Just let it pass without obeying it. You don't need proof right now. You need practice at not demanding it. If anxiety rises while you sit here, and for some of you it might, that's not a sign this isn't working. It's often the opposite. It's the old pattern, the one built on years of gripping and bracing, feeling the grip loosen and not quite trusting the release yet. You don't have to fight that anxiety. You don't have to explain it away. Just breathe through it, the way you'd wait out a wave rather than fight it, knowing it passes on its own if you let it. And tonight, if this stays with you as you fall asleep, that's not incidental. Florence often spoke about the mind continuing to work while the body rests, realigning quietly with what you've chosen to believe, without any effort from you at all. You don't have to hold on to this thought to make it work. You simply have to stop holding it so tightly that it can't move. For now, that's enough. You named what was standing in the way. You spoke the words. You stayed instead of rushing past the moment the way you might have a week ago. That, in itself, is already a step back onto the road. Something quieter tends to happen after a moment like the one we just shared. Not always dramatic, rarely immediate, but real. Florence Scovel Shinn described this shift as an inner reorganization that, in time, begins to show up in outer circumstances. Not because saying a few words rearranges the physical world by magic, but because a mind that stops bracing against good starts noticing it. And noticing, she taught, is very often the first step toward receiving. Here is what that tends to look like in ordinary life. The phone call you'd been avoiding suddenly feels easier to make, not because the outcome is guaranteed, but because you're no longer approaching it from fear. The email you'd rewritten 4 times gets sent as it was the first time, because perfecting it stopped feeling like protection and started feeling like delay. A conversation you'd been dreading turns out to be simpler than you'd built it up to be in your mind. None of these need to be dramatic signs from the universe. They're what tends to happen when a person stops walking with their shoulders braced and their eyes fixed only on the next 2 steps. You might notice something return that you'd quietly written off. An old client reaching back out. A door that had seemed permanently closed cracking open, just slightly, for reasons that have nothing to do with anything you did in the last 10 minutes. Florence would resist the temptation to call these coincidences signs sent specifically to reward you. She taught something more grounded than that. That divine order has always been moving, arranging circumstances long before you were ready to notice them, and that the shift isn't in the world suddenly deciding to cooperate. The shift is in you finally being in a state to see what was already there. This is worth sitting with, because it protects against a trap many people fall into after a moment like the one we just shared, waiting for a sign as proof that it worked. That waiting is control again, in one more disguise. Checking the road every few minutes instead of walking it. Florence taught something almost opposite. Once you've spoken your intention honestly, the next task isn't watching for evidence. It's living the next hour, the next conversation, the next ordinary task, from a slightly different place than you lived it an hour ago. Less gripping, less rehearsing disaster, a little more willing to let a plan unfold instead of forcing every detail of it yourself. Some days nothing visible happens at all. That's worth naming honestly, because pretending otherwise would be its own kind of dishonesty. Florence never taught that alignment produces instant results on command. She taught something slower and, in the long run, more trustworthy. That a mind consistently held in trust rather than fear begins to recognize and respond to circumstances differently. You won't always see it moving. That was true on the road at the start of this video, and it's still true now. But something in you already knows the difference between walking braced for disaster and walking simply forward. And that difference, more than any single sign or circumstance, is what Florence meant by being in alignment. If any part of what you've heard today has stayed with you, there's a simple way to keep walking this road together. Florence Scovel Shinn wrote in a different era, for a very different world, and yet almost everything she taught still applies, almost word for word, to what it feels like to worry about money at 2 in the morning today. That's part of what keeps this channel going, the fact that her teachings weren't a product of their time. They were closer to something timeless, dressed in the language available to her then. Every video here tries to do what this one has tried to do. Take one teaching, sit with it slowly, and let it actually land, instead of rushing through 10 ideas that never quite settle into anything you can use. Subscribing isn't just a way to help this channel grow, though it certainly does that too. It's a quiet way of saying, I want to keep walking this road, and I'd like company along the way. Maybe you found this video at 2 in the morning, unable to sleep the way so many people seem to. Maybe it was during a lunch break, a quiet 15 minutes stolen back from a day that didn't feel like it belonged to you. Maybe someone sent it to you and you almost didn't click it and something made you stay anyway. Sometimes a teaching reaches us at exactly the moment we have the space to receive it. There's a new video most weeks, sometimes built around a single teaching, sometimes around one sentence of Florence's that turns out to hold far more than it first appears to, the way today's did. If this video felt like it was speaking to something real in your life, there will very likely be another one soon that does the same, for whatever the next thing is that you're quietly carrying. So if you'd like this to be a place you return to, for the quiet moments before bed when your mind is finally still enough to hear something true, or the drive home when you need a different voice than the one usually running in your head, subscribing is how you make sure this road stays easy to find again. You don't have to do anything else right now. Just tap it if it felt right and let's keep going. Let's go back to the road one last time. The woman walking it. Early morning. Mist still low over the ground. For most of this video, she believed she was walking alone. She looked down and saw one set of footprints, and for years that felt like proof. But something has been true the entire time, whether she could see it or not. Divine order has been moving too. Not toward some distant, someday version of her life. Toward this one. Toward her, exactly as she is, exactly where she's standing right now. Picture the road bending gently the way roads do. And somewhere just past that bend, out of view until this exact moment, a second set of footprints, coming from the opposite direction, closer than she ever let herself imagine. They were never meant to rush toward each other. Florence never taught urgency or panic, or a finish line to sprint for. This was always closer to two people walking at exactly the pace the journey required, each one covering the ground only they could cover, on a road that was quietly, patiently, bringing them together the entire time. Remember the train. The one you were so sure you'd missed, standing on that platform, checking a schedule no one gave you. That fear made sense once. It made sense back when you believed prosperity was something that passed by on its own timeline, indifferent to whether you were ready. But that was never quite the whole picture. What is yours by divine right is not lost simply because fear convinced you that you were late. It has been walking this entire time, the way it always was, long before this video, long before tonight, toward the exact place you're standing. Today, you didn't find wealth waiting at the end of some road. Today you found your way back onto it. That's a smaller sentence than most of what you've been promised your whole life. No sudden windfall. No dramatic before and after. Just this. The fear that made you brace, the scarcity that made you count what was missing, the control that made you carry everything alone. For one evening at least you set them down. And in that small, quiet moment of setting them down, the meeting that was always underway became a little easier to notice. Perhaps the greatest miracle was never that wealth finds you. It's that you finally stopped walking away from it. Before we end tonight, let's take one more quiet moment together. Wherever you are, if you can, let your shoulders drop just slightly. You've likely been holding them tighter than you realized, for longer than you realized. Close your eyes if that feels comfortable. Take a slow breath in, and let it out slower than it came in. More. Now, you don't have to solve anything tonight. You don't have to know how, or when, or in what form. That was never actually your task. Never was. If you'd like, let this be the last thought you carry with you as you go. Just because you cannot see movement doesn't mean nothing is moving. Somewhere, quietly, things may already be shifting in ways you cannot yet see. Within you, around you, and through the choices you are beginning to make. You don't have to chase it tonight. You only have to rest, and allow yourself to notice what is already finding its way. Good night.